Mujal, if you permit me, let me. I think we will be very much interested to start in that manner that you just briefly inform us about the little background about you, about your architectural journey. They start, and then after that, we will be. There are some questions written, but mostly those questions are focused on your design philosophy first. How do you see architecture, and what, in your opinion, is the state of architecture? And then subsequently, whenever you feel appropriate while discussing other projects, we would, because we are interviewing you from Pakistan, we will be very much also interested in your views about your design philosophy that you implemented in Aga Khan Hospital design, as well as other work that you did with the Armed Forces Medical City, and also that this, how do you feel, and your relationship with with Tom Payette, and your with all these things vis-a-vis Aga Khan, and little history or chronology, little about the Aga Khan Hospital, and then projects that you did internationally are equally important to us.
Thank you. Yes, of course, you all know that my name is Mozhan Khadem, and I was born and raised in Iran until I was 19 years old, and I was cultivated in a family that was very much into uh, literature and history and so on. So my father was a very intellectual man, and my mother was loved arts and always encouraged me in that direction. But I went to the University of Tehran for the first year and a half, and I believe I received very good education there. In fact, the professor I had there was, I learned more from him than I learned from any professor at Harvard, frankly. But at the age of 19, I came to America, and uh, there was I didn't want to go to America. I wanted to go to Italy, but my father insisted I should go to the United States. In those days, the United States was the land of dreams, which is not anymore, unfortunately. My sister had been accepted to Worcester College. Worcester College was interested in foreign students, and they convinced me that I should go and start my architecture at Worcester College. And I went there without any preparation. I didn't like it. Then there was a university in Ohio by the name of Miami University. They had architecture. My uncle, who was living nearby, took me there. I was very upset with their architectural program. It was a newly established architectural school. So I transferred to the University of Illinois, where my uncle had studied. It had a good architectural program. I got my bachelor's degree there, and I applied to study at Harvard, to study city planning. And then when I got there, I got my master's there a few years, and I was very disappointed in that program because I wanted to go to city planning because of my particular interest in the kind of architecture I had envisaged. And after that, having a degree from Harvard, that's a good key at that time to any office. So the office of Perkins and Will hired me, and in the course of I joined them in 1961, and by the end of 60s, I was elevated to partner and the chief of design for the entire office. It was one of the big offices in America. And I tell you how that happened. It all happened because of my particular attitude about architecture and design, which was very novel at that time. Now, why wasn't I interested in I don't think I got enough out of city planning at Harvard, because my concept, I mean, I went to School of Architecture at a time when the Beaux-Arts system was being abandoned. And everything was based on minimal architecture, less is more, form follows function, and all of that. I was very young to form opinion, but deep down, I really did not could not commit to that kind of philosophy, because I felt that architecture is not really this, should not be the signature of the architect or the builder who builds it. Architecture is talks about the culture of people, you know, doesn't talk about the personality of the ego of the architect or the developer.
Yeah.
It's about the user and the culture of the user. And I always felt it was really absurd for some architects at that time, and even now, they sit in their ivory tower in London or New York, and they design something that is appropriate for New York or London or Houston or, I don't know, Berlin, and they transport it and put it in the middle of India or in the deserts of Saudi Arabia or in the Gulf countries, which is it's happening right now. Just go there and see these unbelievable, stunning pieces of architecture, which doesn't have anything to do with either the culture of people. It's just something to dazzle your eyes.
Yeah.
So therefore, and I was when I was very young, I was very interested other aspects of art and literature, especially. They always moved me. And coming from an Iranian background, we have a very rich literary tradition. And I also became familiar with the literary tradition of of England and Shakespeare and so on and so forth. But I always felt that the literary tradition, especially when it comes to the mystical tradition in Iran, is unsurpassed. And I was studying those very carefully. And then simultaneously, I was studying the works of Arthur Upham Pope. I don't know if you have seen those. He's an old scholar who studied a lot of the important architecture in our part of the world, and especially in Iran. And I became fascinated by a concept that it had. Architecture in our part of the world, which relates to the culture of the people, is not the architecture of a lot of singular buildings separated from each other. It is continuous architecture that surrounds the observer and melts into the fabric of the city and merges from it. Now, I have seen a lot of works in Pakistan. I know the works, architectural works in Lahore very well,
Yeah.
Akbar Fort and so on. And I even know your necropolises very well. I have taken a lot of pictures there. And this kind of architecture also relates to your culture. And also the literary tradition of Iran relates very much to your literary tradition. So I went to Harvard to study city planning because I thought if I got involved in large scale design, they would teach me how to approach this, uh, uh, the idea of uh, the continuous architecture that surrounds the observer and how it relates to the culture of people. But no, absolutely, there was no such a talk there. It was the era after Gropius when CERT was ruling, and CERT brought brute concrete, bare concrete into the picture, and everybody was doing all of these things, which were interesting. But in retrospect, right now, when you go and see the works of CERT or CERTian works in the United States or Canada, you wish somebody would put a bomb and destroy them. They are really very, very ugly, and they don't age very well. I was invited by the president of Ecuador years ago to give a talk there on architecture, and I went there. The old city of in the capital of Ecuador is what? I forgot the name of it. The old city is magnificent, and you go to this old square and you can spot all of these devastations that the students of CERT have created in there. They destroyed the historic city. At any rate, so when I graduated from Harvard, I decided the only way I can implement my kind of architecture is to get involved with big projects. At that time, there were not too many firms that were doing this, but Perkins and Will was a prominent firm in Chicago with an office in New York and in Washington, and they were doing educational facilities and colleges. I thought, okay, college is not a single building. There are many buildings, and maybe I can implement my ideas and develop them. My ideas were not developed at that time. Well, I joined them, and then one of the after a year or so, they gave me a project which was Salisbury Laboratories in Charles City, Iowa, and I have sent that to Mr. Shikoh also. And in that, I did what I wanted to do because they would put the laboratories in a block and they uh, put parking under it or whatever, and that's it. But I completely did the reverse of that. And the president of Salisbury, Dr. John Salisbury, became fascinated by my idea and agreed to do it. That was quite a departure from the tradition of doing laboratories. And I did a small scale continuous architecture that surrounds the observer, and the courtyard became important, the landscaping of it became important, and the water features, I used a lot of water features idea from our part of the world. And in a very short time, they appointed me as the chief of design of an office of 200 people, and then they elevated me to the partnership level. So that was the beginning of all of that adventure. And lo and behold, in 1971, my senior partner, who was a health expert by the name of Itad Bider, came to me and he said, do you know the Aga Khan? He has sent inquiries to us whether we are interested in doing a new hospital and university project for them. And of course, since I am familiar with history, I said, yes, I know the Aga Khan is a very important man. And he said, well, they're coming here for an interview.
Okay.
We know that your ideas of architecture is different. And some of them wouldn't understand what I was saying, but all the senior partners respected me and they had become my friend because I was leading the design of the whole firm.
Okay.
So that's how it started. And I went to that interview and things happened.
I think it's very important for us to know a little more about your design philosophy, a little about your views on architecture itself. Then we will come to Aga Khan and few of your other projects.
Especially after I got that recognition by doing that small laboratory. It wasn't a big laboratory project, but it was big enough for me to implement my ideas. And I got that recognition and I was promoted in the firm. And Dr. John Salisbury loved it so much. It's amazing how much he loved it because I had put a fountain there that with running water throughout the courtyard and so on. This wasn't done like that before. I felt, well, okay, maybe my ideas is applicable as I became a lot bolder. Uh, and my idea stems from the fact, as I mentioned to you, that architecture is the outward expression of the culture and the way of life of people. And it has to be respected, and its beauty should be demonstrated. When we take an approach like that to architecture, we are also contributing to world peace and world unity. Because just imagine, when you put a glass tower in the middle of a desert, for people who are not used to that and their ways of life are different, they always are going to a home that is not familiar with them. And that creates a lot of emotional anxiety for them. I always say, just look at the bedroom of your son or daughter, no matter what kind of a minimalist room you give them, go after a while there are all kinds of posters and everything there. It shows their spirit. We have to respect that. The worst thing that has happened in modern architecture is that it is devoid. I mean, I think the biggest false slogan is less is more. And another biggest false slogan is form follows function. always form should not follow function, and always less is not more. Less can be more sometimes. And I would explain that to you later, how we understand people from some of the treatment of the surfaces. So, for example, right now, when in our speech, the words I am telling you, I'm conveying to you, what are they? It's the architecture of my thought is the speech. But what is behind it? Behind it are very highly elevated concepts that's in my mind that are not really conducive to being reduced to words. The moment I reduce it to words, the elevation and the sublimity of that thought is reduced. So, what is everything in the world of phenomena? All the phenomena around us are architecture of a reality that exists behind it. In my opinion, everything in the world of phenomena, everything we see in the world, the appearance of it is architecture. But there is a meaning behind it. That appearance is conveying that meaning, which is beyond words. It's in a higher elevated realm, that meaning. Like, as I said, my speech is the architecture of my thought. My thought belongs to a much higher realm. It is not possible to explain it or express it. The only way to express it is in the shell of words. And the shell is less than the meaning. Anytime right now when I'm conveying my thoughts to you, I am reducing that high level of my thinking into words that make it is at a lower level, make it less elevated, makes it more understandable materially, not spiritually. This tree, the architecture of the tree that you see here is the outward expression of the tree is the architecture of this tree. But this tree is telling you about a reality beyond it, beyond its architecture. It's telling you about the seed and about the rain and the sun and the water, and then goes back to the previous seeds, and it goes back to many, many years, and in the case of human being, to thousands of years. There is a lot of meaning in this tree. And all we see is its appearance, which is beautiful. The appearance of, in the world of phenomena, all appearances, all architecture is beautiful. But it's telling you a special story about its inner meaning. And it's the inner meaning that we have to talk about. Now, look at this statue of the nude woman. This is one of the great works of Gian Bologna. The Renaissance architects knew this. So I want to tell you that at the apogee of its perfection, human body is the outward expression of the inner reality of human being, of each one of us. Now, do you know what Gian Bologna has named this piece of architecture?
Okay.
This piece of sculpture. Each one of us, our body is the outward expression of the stage at which we have reached our perfection. But from this outward expression, we have to understand the inner reality of each human being. When you look at architecture like this, there cannot be two similar architecture in the world. It's a fallacy when an architect designs a university or something in one place and duplicates it in another place, and we say, this is the work of Frank Gehry. I don't want to minimize the importance of Frank Gehry or Zaha Hadid or whatever. This is just a signature of them. It is the outward expression of their personality. But every situation is different and has to be unique. So what I am saying is that On the right-hand side, in the material realm, we have the architecture of the tree, and it's beautiful. Its appearance is beautiful. But the inner reality is on a different realm. It's on the realm of, in an eternal realm, and I call it the truth. It's the idea in its unicity. It's the uniqueness of that idea, which is different for all the every tree is different from another. Every flower is different from another. Every human being is different from another. Dear Hafeez, who is sitting here, and dear Mr. Shikoh, who is sitting here, you are unique, one of a kind. You have never been like this. There has never been a creation like this before, and there will never be a creation like this after. So everything should have its unicity. Now, what causes this truth in the eternal realm to materialize? It is the power of love. That is the motivating force. Each one of us, when we get involved in a project, if we really try to understand and find out what its truth is, we would be in a path of search for that truth. When we find the truth, we have found beauty. Truth is beauty, and beauty is truth. This is what John Keats has said in his wonderful poem, Ode to the Eternal Urn. I don't remember the exact quotation, but I can tell you hours of poetry from Rumi and Attar about truth is beauty, beauty is truth. So if we really try to find out what the truth of an architectural program is, that means the way of life of people, the culture of people, their history of people, their literature, their music. We have to find all of that to be able to come close to the truth of to the beauty of architecture that is discovered as a result of that truth. Who is the agent for this discovery? It is the architect. What is the method of it? Is search. And what is the vehicle of it? Is design. Unfortunately, in most design schools, I believe architectural education is in the wrong direction. In most of the schools, everybody is talking about the excellence of design. That's irrelevant. Design is just a vehicle, it's just a shell to convey your ideas and your thought. It is composed of proportions, of colors, and different things. But the important thing is for that design to be so transparent by an architect who understands all the background and tries to discover the reality behind the architecture. The design should become so transparent so that the idea behind the architecture shines through it.
Wonderful.
Why do we call La Pietà of Michelangelo, or the David of Michelangelo, or the Ecstasy of Santa Teresa by Bernini, or a lot of other pieces of works of art, or the third act of, in my opinion, of Puccini's Tosca, the prelude to the third act, as masterpieces? Because when we hear that, when we read the poetry of Rumi or Attar, or when we see the great pieces of architecture, the design has become so transparent that the idea behind it shines through it.
Okay, wonderful.
And when you are in front of a masterpiece like that, it usually comes with tears in your eyes. Just imagine seeing the La Pieta for the first time and understanding it. Or, I was only 22, 3 years when I went to Florence, and I went to the church of Santa Maria Novella in Florence, and I faced the Masaccio's painting of Trinity. I am not a Christian, but I knelt down and cried.
Yeah, that's the truth behind that.
Or when you hear the poetry of Attar's Mantiqot, or you see the Mugharras work, the entrance portal of Masjid Shah in Isfahan, or a lot of your great architectural work, if you really look at it, it moves you. That is when the idea is shining behind this thin veil of design. Now, a lot of architects, in order to become famous, and because we are involved in a commercialized world, they build something or do something, and they hit their hand in the computer, and it rolls out itself, and it becomes like a tower of spaghetti, and they build it, and it becomes sensational. Is that really architecture, or the fanciful imagination of an architect who wants to promote his self or his image, and get published on the cover of magazines? The emotion that it evokes in you, you say, "Wow, look at that." But it does not move you. It's not a piece of art. It's a sensationalist piece of work.
Station.
So that has been my motivating force ever since I started designing and practicing architecture, to make sure that it reflects the culture of people, and the true meaning behind it is discovered. Of course, you're going to ask me, if that is the case, if it's a process of discovery, all architects should who are given the same project should come up with the same answer. No, I think if an architect is sincere and tries to find it, he will find it through his own prism.
Okay.
Just think of the sun. The sun is shining through a lot of prisms.
Yeah.
Depending on the color of prism, if the prism is transparent, depending on its color, it may come out as red, blue, green, or whatever. That the sun is colorless, the ray is colorless, but when it goes through the prism of every individual, and we are all different, it comes out
different,
having some of our color. So it is not that the personality or the ideas of the architect would be lost. No, if the architect is sincere enough and tries to find out that reality, it will come through having some of his own color too. The uniqueness of the culture is demonstrated also through the uniqueness of the architect.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Now, having said all of that, this is really the sum of my design ideas, which led to the idea of the continuous architecture. Why continuous? Because human life is continuous. You are designing a project, its inner reality is human life behind it. And you cannot separate human life into different parts. The biggest problem with our architectural education is that it makes us incapable of producing great architecture. Why? Because when we go to school, they give us a project for the university. A university has 80 different buildings. The first thing they teach us to do is to take every part and separate it into 80 different buildings, and then take every one of these 80 different buildings, School of Humanities, School of Science, School of this, School of that, and break it down into parts and develop its functional relationship. And then on and on, this breakdown goes on and on and on. And when it's like the human body, you separate each part of it from other part, you cannot put it together properly.
Yeah.
We are not taught to be thinking holistically.
Yeah.
So the way I started approaching architecture is, when we get a program for a big university like the Aga Khan, or like the AKUH University, or like the American University in Cairo, the first approach was to take all of these 80 different buildings or 100 different buildings that is produced by an educational programmer usually, and I tell my team to deconstruct it, to take it all apart and decide on the kinds of spaces that are appropriate for the living of the students and faculties and so on. But what I mean by that is spaces for motion, spaces for transition, spaces for repose, spaces for public gathering. And you wind up then with a system of voids and spaces. And then you take the program and divide it into what is conducive to public spaces. All the big classrooms, all the big lecture rooms are conducive to public classes, to public spaces, regardless of what school they belong to. It may belong to the School of Medicine. It may belong to the School of Law and Humanities. Don't think about separating them to different schools. Education is one process. And then take spaces that are conducive to motion. You go from one space to another. You move through a little street or a little lane, and spaces for contemplation. There are spaces you need to sit down next in a bench, next to a fountain with your beloved, fall in love, or have intellectual discourse, and so on. Once all of these voids are organized, then take the program, regardless what discipline it belongs to, and arrange those around those spaces. And then, of course, this idea expands to landscape architecture and so on. Everything is landscape architecture. There is no architecture. Everything is landscape. And the architecture you produce has to become subservient to landscape. If an architect designs something that imposes itself on the landscape and doesn't become the continuation of the landscape, that is a great sin, because you are violating the trust of God, which is landscape, and you are trying to impose and put your ego above it. That kind of architecture, form doesn't follow function, because you're organizing all of these things according to the voids and spaces, which becomes continuous architecture of interior spaces. But then there are times that you are moved to feel something has to happen somewhere, reflection on the part of the architect, to put something there that doesn't have any function. Don't worry about it, because a lot of times form evokes function. Why? Because if you make architecture functionally specific, you are going against the nature of man, because everything changes. Every function changes over time. And if you make it functionally specific, that space will become dead after a while. Even surgical operating rooms have changed. When I design laboratories, I design them in a way that they can be changed. Otherwise, you are putting a model there that is not, may work for one researcher, but 5 years ago, later it won't. Therefore, this fallacy of form follows function, which was the invention, I don't know, I think Sullivan said that, or whoever said that, is great for some very specified spaces. But to apply that to all architecture, which schools do when I was studying, is a fallacy. And also, minimalist architecture, taking everything away from the surfaces, is another big fallacy, because the spirit of people can be seen on the surfaces. Look at the room of your son or your daughter. Take them to take all of the posters off. They cannot live in that room anymore, because the memory of a culture is on the surfaces of architecture. Ever since they have said minimalist architecture, what has happened is that sculpture, painting, calligraphy, Mogharnas work, or all of these things in our part of the world and in the West, sculpture, painting, and all of that were abandoned from the surfaces of architecture. And it's for generations that they are wandering around and don't find any place to show themselves except in some exclusive galleries. So this is another fallacy. Overdoing it is terrible, but doing it appropriately is completely the correct thing to do.
The merits of what you're saying by many, there is a total lack of ability left in the architects to address. What is your
Well, I think you're absolutely right. See, the problem is that, in my opinion, everything is architecture. Practice of architecture is the noblest act. We call God the architect of the universe. You see, we have reduced architecture to the level of to a technical level of putting brick and mortar together. No, it's a lot more than that. We have to understand its uniqueness, we have to understand its importance, and we have to change our educational system. The problem is with the educational system. I don't think anybody who comes to study architecture should have had training or should have expressed interest in history, in culture, in literature, in music. He should become familiar with all of that. And when we take a project from a client like the Aga Khan or Koç University, American University in Cairo, or any other university, or any project, we have to understand the cultural background of that project. We have to delve into the history of that project. We have to delve into the literature of the client, into the music that the client likes. Otherwise, we are not able to satisfy our function. It has been reduced because of this minimalist Bauhaus attitude to taking everything and separating it into parts. And what I'm saying, the philosophy I'm explaining is not a Persian or an Eastern or a Pakistani philosophy. No, it applies to all architecture everywhere in the world. It applies to architecture in New York City. It applies to architecture in Colombia, in Peru, in Europe, in everywhere. Everywhere, when we take up on a project, we have to understand what is the inner reality of that project and try to research that inner reality by the force that is love. Means we love to do this work. If we don't love to do it, forget it. You don't produce anything. The love is the motivating purpose. And when you search and you go through it, you find a solution that would be unique for that client, but also it shows your unique personality as well. So the foundation is that our education system has to change. But it's very difficult to change that, because you talk right now to any professor of architecture or any dean of the School of Architecture with this kind of language, they say, oh, come on, you're just a mystic, you're daydreaming.
Well,
But
you're
that's
very rightly said, and this handicap situation that I mentioned you, and the most surprisingly, I will mention about something without offending anybody. That's not my intention, but I would like to mention. I wanted to mention this thing after your ideas about Aga Khan Hospital, but since the topic that you just mentioned, it's very relevant to talk on this right now. Maybe this can be again discussed when you will be discussing Aga Khan Hospital, because we are in Pakistan and experienced and enjoyed actually as a user the Aga Khan architecture and the kind of spirit that you mentioned, the ideology that you mentioned just now, and experienced that in Aga Khan as a user, not an architect, as a user. And we really enjoyed for the 30 years that buildings. The ideas behind building and this approach that you are just mentioning, that architecture be seen as, be taken as the act of discovering the inner reality and finding out, what the culture is and what kind of, human psychology of this region is and what the social desire of this region and how the scale and everything, and the reflect and the expression that we find in Aga Khan Hospital, suddenly find that, the entire team that I noticed from the end product, that perhaps the team has lost that basic approach that was there in Aga Khan. We had been appreciating that all the time while using Aga Khan. And now we see that, the buildings standing aloof again, and that continuity of spaces is lost. The entire approach is lost in the new development. So from there, I noticed that, what is something is wrong in the application of the design philosophy that we enjoyed all the time in the first phase of Aga Khan Hospital and maybe second phase of the Aga Khan Hospital, and today's interventions are totally in contrast with that. So this is my experience that I noticed uh, as a user, not as an architect, as a user of Aga Khan Hospital. I wanted you to speak on that also, but after you have mentioned about Aga Khan Hospital's design. and
Well,
how
I just say a few words about that. Frankly, I don't know because I left um, uh, being a partner at Payette Associate in 1994 or 5. Uh, uh, I don't know the people who continued designing after me. I doubt very much that they had any concept of what I'm mention to you right now about design philosophy, because I know Tom Payette paid lip service to it because I was the head of design and conducted everything. But after I left, I don't even know he had the intellectual uh, capacity to understand everything that we are talking about today. Whoever is designing probably is designing from another point of view that I just discussed with you,
exactly.
right?
That's the thing. Actually, I happened to a couple of years back when Tom Pate was in Karachi. I think it's almost more than 10 years now. And now you see building named by somebody for some by, and don't know that building emerging as a significant structure out of it, which is a total contrast with the rest of the development. So,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
then I didn't find any receive any answer, any satisfactory answer from Pierre directly. So that
well,
is how I then I spoke to you.
I haven't seen what has happened since I left the project, but I would not be surprised uh, because you see, Tom was raised in a certain school, and every time he had an opportunity, he wanted to design that way. But Tom was a wonderful guy, and we became very good friends. And he respected my judgment in leading the design the way I wanted to. But then, I don't know anybody. I assume it's continuing. I'm assuming Payette is still designing there, but I don't know anybody who really understands what we are talking about right now in terms
Yeah,
of this
because
kind of
imagine,
design.
out of your courtyards, rising building of 15-story structure, typical,
Yeah,
So,
unfortunately,
so
unfortunately,
that
yes.
is good.
But you see, you have to have a team of dedicated people who understand that. Now, I explained to you in other projects that we discussed how I was able to develop this team, both at the Aga Khan University and also later when I did other projects.
Muzhan, here I mentioned you that I've had a unique experience when I still remember the design of Armed Forces Medical City was a winning
Yes,
design earlier before you entered. Actually, you were traveling somewhere, and I think John Ruffing or someone was involved into the design of. But once you saw the design, you were shocked, and I still remember your expression about it. And then you said, nothing doing. I'm not going to implement this design. It has to be changed drastically. And
yes,
as far as the clients are concerned, Ziaul Haq was the client. Ziaul Haq was the. So you said, I'm going to convince everybody. That's a secondary thing. First thing that in the very first place, the design should be the right at the right. I remember that thing, and then you convinced not only at the Payette Associate, you convinced in NESPAC also everybody. You gave a lecture
yes,
in NESPAC. I remember that
yes,
incident.
yes.
And
Well,
you
I tell you,
made them take the risk of changing the design at that time. It was a time, unique time, that the design was a winning design. Yet
yeah,
you changed the entire concept. But actually, the thing that I learned from you, that don't compromise on the design quality. You do justice to the design. It's a lesson to the young architects, all the young architects who will be listening to your interview, that don't compromise on the quality of design. Be genuine, truthful to that. And as far as convincing the clients and the rest of the, you can devise many methods to make them understand. That
yes.
requires a different kind of ability. But that lack of ability to convince them should not affect your design. So I think it's a great lesson that I learned from you. That is the reason I call you my mentor.
No, 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 no. Once upon
I
we all learned from each other. I learned a lot from you as well,
Yeah,
Hafiz.
but this will
You
have.
are very generous.
I would request
But
Muzhan
let
to
me also
talk.
some
Yeah.
let me also something another fallacy in architecture. Something right now they decide on a facade, and they think all the facades should be the same. I have an example which I show to you. I believe every facade of a building should respond to the requirement of the environment in front of it. Sylvester Cancer Clinic that I took up was a very, very difficult project, very difficult in a very chaotic campus. Each side is different. One side is in front of a monorail going in the sky. One side is in front of a courtyard. One side is in front of the street. So we did every side responding to that environment. I think these are all things that I have gained experience through time, but it's quite different from the way they are taught in schools.
I think I would like to know about Aga Khan University project, how you got involved in that one. You are telling.
My question would be, Murtuza, that if you could start from that, how you got inducted first into the design of Aga Khan University, and then subsequently your design philosophy, and then end result. We are already experiencing in Pakistan, and people in Karachi and most of the areas of Pakistan know about the design and the experience of the design. They are very appreciative of this.
Here I would like to add one more thing, that it was, Mr. Hafeez told us that it is actually your design, this Aga Khan University. We were under the impression that's a Tom Peter, but you are the right main person here, what Hafeez told us.
No, don't underestimate the contribution of Tom. No, I don't want to underestimate that. But the the main idea came from me, yeah.
Okay.
But I will explain that to you.
Okay.
Tom is a good friend, bless his soul. He had special talent to use, to know how to use the talent of other people. He was very good at that. And that's a gift he had.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I mentioned to you that when I became the chief of design, director of design for Perkins and Will, and became a partner there, I was very young at that time. I think I was 35 years old or something like that, which made a lot of my colleagues who were born and bred Americans very upset that this young Persian guy all of a sudden has become such a big honcho in the office. Anyway, my senior partner, Ethod Wheeler, who was expert in hospitals, came to me and said, yeah, do you know the Aga Khan? I said, yeah, I know. He's a very important man. He said, well, he is coming, he's sending some people to interview us for a project, for a hospital project. Would you consider coming to the meeting? I was very busy. I said, yes, of course, So I went into that meeting. I had a German partner also by the name of Hans Neumann. He came to that meeting. We had just established Perkins and Will International, because Perkins and Will was just a regional office. There were not too many international American offices at that time. And I encouraged them to do this. And then Hans Neumann and myself were the vice presidents of Perkins and Will International. And then I went into that meeting with him, and Ethod Wheeler was there. Maybe some other partners were there too. A young man by the name of Morgan Wheelock came to interview us together with an older man by the name of Dr. Gray. And he brought an assistant also with him. I don't remember the name of the assistant. So there were 3 of them or 4 of them. They came because the Aga Khan had commissioned the London Economist office that deals with health facilities. I don't remember the name. You may be able to find out. And Dr. Gray was heading that. And his assistant, who did not come to that meeting, I believe, but he was later involved with the project by the name of Ian Robertson. So they came, and Etad Wheeler said, Mojan, they said the Aga Khan was a special project that reflects the culture of the people and so on. And they said, well, why don't you tell your design philosophy? So I told them pretty much what I have told you now in this meeting. And I extended it to talk about Islamic architecture as well. So they left. And after they left, my partner, Hans Newman, would not leave me alone. He said, you have to write all of these things you said in a letter, because I have not heard anybody else talk about architecture like that. Write that. I said, Hans, I'm very busy. I have said all of these things to these people. They would tell the Aga Khan. He said, no. Morgan Wheelock, who was about my age, and we became good friends later, I could see that he was resentful of things you were saying, and send it to Dr. Gray to give it to the Aga Khan himself.
Okay.
I said, okay. So I wrote that letter. My wife is an art historian and was teaching at Northwestern University at that time, getting his PhD and also teaching. And he said, when you write this, document it well and make sure your wife also sees it and thinks art historically it's correct. I said, okay. I tell you, Hans Newman, bless his soul, he is dead now. He made me change this letter 20 times. And he was one of the Nazi youth in the in Hitler's whatever. And every time I would show it to him, he would say, this was his, my dear Mojan, it's not beautiful enough. Do it again.
Okay.
He was older than me, so I did it 20 times. And that seminal letter is what I sent to Dr. Gray. You have a copy of that. I could not find that. I had a copy, I couldn't find it, but I have excerpts of it in this design guidelines, which I can read to you. And among the things that I said there was, I compared Islam and Christianity, and then I went on to say that in Islam, secular aspects of life has always been given prominence to. I talked about the architecture of continuous spaces that surrounds the observer. And I said the sequence of spaces is not simply a series of mechanically laid out courtyards connected with links, a fallacy, variety of enclosures with differing scales, proportion, and function. The manner of transition between courts is most significant. These spaces of transition have been handled with supreme artistry, in our part of the world. Each provides for a different function which psychologically prepares the observer for the succeeding architectural event. Each has its appropriate entrance portal that partially or completely conceals the full impact of the magnificent court behind it. As these delightful courtyards unfold in a rhythmic and hierarchical sequence before the bedazzled eye of the beholder, he gains a profound artistic experience that cannot be attributed to any singular architectural episode or any specific point in time. The experience is derived from the whole of the complex while observed in a state of motion, and this is kinetic architecture. And I said, technology has to be brought to the service of such a noble idea, which is befitting the ambitions or the desires of His Highness the Aga Khan. Anyway, I sent this letter.
Okay.
And Morgan Wheelock had a friend or knew of Tom Payette in Boston, who had a very small office at that time. He had only 10 or 12 people at that time. And he tried to convince and Tom Payette had designed a hospital, a new hospital, small hospital, Leonard Morse Hospital. I believe it was in Natick, Massachusetts, which was a hospital designed in the style of Sertian design of,
Right.
root concrete and so on and so forth. I never liked that hospital, but evidently Morgan Wheelock liked that hospital. and tried to convince the Aga Khan to hire Tom Payette for this project. When I believe when the Aga Khan received my letter, he insisted that Mozhan Khadem has to be, they had gone all over the world,
Mhm.
They didn't only come to Chicago. He said, no matter what, Mozhan Khadem should be the design consultant of this project.
Okay.
Morgan was pushing for Tom Payette. And I found out that Tom is calling me, my office, and wanted to see me. And I said, you're welcome. He came to Chicago and tried to convince me to become the design consultant on the project with him. I said, no, I mean, I didn't say this to him. We're just a 10, 12-man office here. Our Chicago office is 200 people. Our New York office is so many. Our Washington office is so many. I'm the chief of design here. I will not. You come and join us, But Tom was a very persistent kind of a guy and a very charming kind of a guy. He knew how to charm people. And he did not charm people out of trying to deceive them. He was just actually, he kept coming. He wouldn't give up. He kept coming back to convince me. So finally, I said, I went to my senior partner, the founder of the firm, Larry Perkins, who was one of the greatest men I have ever seen. He was a wonderful, wonderful individual, very generous, wonderful, huge man, when I would sit next to him, I would come to his navel. Because I'm a small guy. Okay. I'm joking, but I would come to his ear probably. And he was heavy too. And then he listened to me. I said, look, Larry, this is what Tom wants. Tom wants me to become design consultant on the project. We should get the project. He looked at me for a while. He said, Mozhan, don't be so proud. Accept it. He said, you never know where it would get you. Rather than being, that dinky little office, how dare he says that. You see how generous Larry Perkins was. And as a result of my effort to make it international, it's one of the biggest international firms in the world, Perkins and Will. If you look them up, that's how they became international. I started it. Anyway, so I called Tom. I said, okay. I checked with Larry, the founder of the firm. He said, accept it. I'll accept it. So what happened is that when the Aga Khan found out that it was accepted, the Aga Khan insisted it should be a separate agreement with me because he wanted me to be on the project. But from the very beginning, although Tom was very charming, he was trying to get rid of me, but he couldn't because he didn't understand this design idea,
That is what.
We had the first meeting in Boston, and I was assigned as the design consultant separately. And then the Aga Khan asked that there be an office in London. So they established an office in London, and I would go often, every time, to London to develop the schematic design. We met with the Aga Khan before the schematic design was presented, and I showed did I send you a bunch of blocks showing how I expressed the concept to the Aga Khan? Yes. I expressed, I thought a lot how I can convey my ideas to the team and also to the Aga Khan. You see, this is right now very primitive. This is 50 years old. We do it a lot more in a more sophisticated way now. But okay. I put all of these blocks together, and I told them that if we put all of these blocks in the form of a singular building, we get this. Show the second one, please. We get something like that. This was Marina Towers in Chicago. And then the third one, this thing which is in Israel.
Yeah.
This would be the result of our design for the Aga Khan University, which unfortunately it looks like things like that are happening there now. And then the next one. And then I said, but if man becomes the center of attention and not the object of a lot of separate buildings, I made this courtyard and put the man in there. And then I followed that by the other slide. Could you show the next slide? And I said, okay, to relate it to outside, there would be exits, and these exits would lead to another courtyard. Show the other one. We have to connect them, and we have transition spaces, and each one of these would have a portal, entrance portal. And the entrance portal is shown is red. Next one.
Yeah.
And they're connected like this. And then next one. Then I said, when we continue this and we assign functions to different voids, we wind up with the architecture of continuous interior spaces, continuous. We wind up with the architecture of continuous interior spaces that surrounds the observer rather than isolated buildings that stand apart from him. And they understood the idea by having demonstrated it like this. Next one. And of course, these ideas are kind of commonplace, and the method of presenting it was not that sophisticated, but at that time it was, to the point that Tom Payette always carried. It was, this was so, they were also impressed with it that I remember even to many years later, Tom would carry these slides and would show people how we design and so on and so forth. And it became a something in our office. Anyway, Prince.
Just a question that, when you made this presentation to Aga Khan, was he able to, conceive the idea and, understood the idea well in that?
Yes, he went very well. He really liked it. And he honored me in that meeting and told me to make sure that these ideas are implemented, So the project actually started with this design team of my being design consultant, Payette associate being the hospital expert on this project. Sometimes I believe in 17, because the seminal letter was in December 1971, I believe. Okay. Sometimes after that seminal letter, it started and continued in 1972. So at any rate, this became the master plan. This is not what we presented to the Aga Khan, but this really became the master plan based on those diagrams that I had shown before, the block diagrams. The stuff on the top, which is separate from the middle part, is the School of Nursing. Okay. Now, what happened is that this happened, there were many meetings in London, and I would fly to London, spend time and work on the design. And so we came up with something that this is the final product. Do you have the next picture on this or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the way it was later on constructed, and then later on. Well, let me talk about that right now. Our effort in establishing an office in Tehran produced great results, and to the point that I wound up with a lot of work in Iran. The entire master plan and central library of Jundi Shapur University, which is the oldest university in Iran, going back to the Sasanian period, to the founder of the Sasanian dynasty.
Okay.
And it was the greatest seat of learning before and after Islamic conquest of Iran. So I was assigned for master plan and also the central library and all the buildings there. And I did this in association with a friend of mine, an architect, Kamran Diba. So I had to go to Iran, and simultaneously, we had gotten a huge project, an urban design project in the west of Tehran, which is called Shahrak Gharb. Right now, it's known as Shahrak Gharb, the West Tehran city, for 400,000 families. It's even bigger than that now. And I signed the contract for that when I arrived in Tehran to open the office in September of 1973.
Okay.
And later on, I can talk about that project at more length if you want to.
Yeah.
It was is right now the most fashionable part of Tehran.
Okay.
So when I opened the office in Tehran, I was very busy. I had Jondi Shapur University. I had this West Tehran development. I had a lot of buildings in Jondi Shapur University. So I was very busy, and I provided service as design consultant, but the design was pretty much set anyway when I left, but it continued.
Mm-hmm. I see.
But what happened is that the Aga Khan wanted to do a seismic design, so he stopped the project for a while, for a few years, and then he wanted to do a redesign of the project based on the new engineering and also some new concepts that he had for the design.
Okay.
So what happened is that the project kept moving in Payette's office with me providing some consultancy services. So I was providing services, going actually once I was invited to go and present the project to President Bhutto at that time, which I was so busy with my office, Tehran office, I couldn't go. The Aga Khan was going to pick me up on his plane, but I couldn't go because I was so busy. But at any rate, the revolution in Iran broke in 1979, and I had to leave Tehran. But at that time, the project had, this is something that I had an artist draw, showing all the spaces related to each other. The only part that kept moving to some extent was the School of Nursing when I was in Tehran. But when the revolution broke and I had to leave my office, and all the Iranians, a lot of Iranians had to leave Iran, I got a call from Tom Payette. I was planning, frankly, to establish my residence in Luxembourg. My wife's family lived there. He gave me a call and he said, "Mozhan, I want to see you." So I went to see Tom Payette in Boston to provide some additional advice on the design. And also he told me, I found out that his office was in big trouble because Shams Qasem Laha was very unhappy with the performance of the office and the people who were assigned to the project.
Okay.
And he had a construction manager by the name of Don Zilli. They were going to fire Payette Associates. And Tom was himself very busy with other projects, couldn't take complete charge of this project. And the people who had taken charge, they wouldn't understand the design. And so he asked me to join him, not as a design consultant, in addition to design consultant, as the partner in charge of the project. I said, okay, provided I'm completely in charge, nobody interferes. He promised that to me. Okay. And I said to him, okay, let the Aga Khan know about this change.
Okay.
That I would be not only design consultant, but I'm taking over the entire operation of the project. He called me back and he said he told the Aga Khan and he was very happy about it.
Okay.
So I moved to Boston. I provided services from Europe for about until 1980, spring of 1980. Then, because of the accumulation of work, spring of 1980, I came to Boston. We had a meeting with Prince Amin. Prince Amin was very unhappy about the way the project was proceeding. So then I took the project over, not only as design consultant, but attending to all of the detailed technical drawings. And I was appalled that the drawings that they had prepared, they had reverted in terms of its technology to the Sertian brute concrete. Of course, it had a plaster face on it, the ochre plaster, but so what I did, I changed everything. And at that time, Farouk Nur Muhammad joined to be trained to go on site as the architect on site. And at the beginning, I and Farouk did not meet eye to eye because he was also raised in this minimalist kind of school. But later on, we became great friends, and he used all of these ideas. He's using all of the ideas I'm telling you in his designs right now.
A great convincing power.
He is a great architect. He has done wonderful things. He has done the Jamaat Khane in Doshambe for the Aga Khan, and has done a very great job. Yeah, without him, this project would not have been executed on site the way it was. Mm-hmm. So from then on, and then what I did, one of the first things I did, because people did not understand what this design was all about, I wrote that design brief, Mr. Shikoh, that you like to publish, guidelines for design. Yes. And everything was proceeded on that basis. Everything from, we changed the design, we changed not the concept of the design, but the way it was going to see. Design development is another step carrying the design further. That was, I had them all changed. I did all the interior design. I sent some of the samples of the interior. Every interior space was designed by a perspective, to the point that I told Farouk, if there is any difference between the drawings and the perspective, the contractor should follow the perspectives, because still some of the mishaps of the past were in the drawings. And we did all the furniture, we did the carpet, we did the calligraphy, we did all the surface treatment, we did all the tiles. Everything was designed separately by a team I developed at that time as the principal in charge of the project at that.
Tom Walsh, Tom Walsh was there.
Pardon me?
Perhaps Tom Walsh was there. Tom Walsh was here.
Yes, Tom Walsh was there. Tom Walsh came there, actually.
Yeah.
Tom Walsh came with Farouk. Tom Walsh was a great worker, but Tom Walsh didn't understand this design either. But Farouk did. Farouk did, and he had an assistant by the name of Muzaffar, who was also very good.
Muzaffar Ansari.
Muzaffar Ansari, yes.
Yeah,
he was a great guy. Yeah, these two, and then they also introduced this calligrapher to me, which I will come to it later. The important thing here are the entrance portals. These are supposed to be reminiscent of the entrance portal of the great mosques in our part of the world. Next one. Farouk spent a lot of time to make sure that these pieces of marble match each other so they would look like one piece of marble. This is a special room in which you will see a lot of symbolic calligraphy, which I can show you later. I sent you the picture, relating to the Ismaili culture specifically.
Okay.
And that image on top of the door, I designed that myself, which conveys the concept of Panchtan Pak in the Ismaili culture.
Okay.
Which Prince Amin really liked, and asked me to put the word of Allah on top of that, and I added that to it.
Okay.
But in the ceiling, the imagery is Ya Ali Madad all the time. I developed that calligraphy myself because this is the greetings that Ismailis, when they see each other, they don't say good morning or anything like that. They say Ya Ali Madad. You probably know that. Next one. And then the wall is all teak. We used a lot of teak. The Aga Khan wanted to use teak in the project, and these were the leftover teaks that I had them put them together in a special way like this, to cover the wall of this auditorium. I used the same teak design at Koç University also in the auditorium of Koç University in Istanbul. Next one. Yes, this is a nice one because it shows the shadow of the calligraphy of the gate on the filter clinic courtyard.
Beautiful, yes.
And the shadow, this calligraphy, I was looking, I did a lot of the calligraphy myself, but I was not expert in traditional calligraphy. So I asked Farouk I believe it was Farouk, who introduced a young Iraqi architect by the name of Essam Al-Ani. Bless his soul. I don't know where he is. I can't find him. And I asked to meet him in Karachi, and when I met him in Karachi, he was playing with something in his hand. I said, Essam, I want the gates to have this kind of calligraphy. And I showed a calligraphic sample from an antique piece of work. And then he started laughing. He said, he used to call me Mujan. He couldn't say Je. He said, oh, Mujan, it's in my hand. And he showed me that he had that piece of antique in his hand.
Okay.
He was dealing in antiques. He would buy antiques. And before he buy them, he would sell them to the sheikhs in the Emirates and would make a lot of money. And I said, yeah, this is what I want. So anyway, I would talk about the calligraphy later, but see how beautiful this image is of the calligraphy on the floor. Yeah. So even down to the signage, it was done under my direction. We were going to have a lot of tile work in this project, tile and woodwork. Because the Aga Khan also wanted this project to promote the arts and crafts of the area. Okay. And of course, one of the arts you have is tile work.
Yeah, in Hala.
I remember I was fascinated by the Hala tiles that I still think is popular in Pakistan.
Yeah. Looking at the
there are Hala tiles, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. They're beautiful tiles, handcrafted tiles.
Yes. So I said, I want Hala tiles. So I and Farouk went and looked at places where they make Hala tiles or traditional tiles. And we wound up in a place with two old men who were producing Hala tiles. And I said, we want Hala tiles. They said, fine, they were glad to give it to us. How many? 7,000. They threw us out of their house because they said they work every day. They produce 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them, you know. We had this dilemma.
Yeah.
So what happened is that, and I thought that we have to have unique tiles for this project. And I was willing to design them all. But who would produce them? We wanted Hala style. And Farouk worked very hard and they established a factory for them. And they brought these old men from Hala to produce these tiles, but they wouldn't work because the kilns were of a different temperature and the colors would run. So they worked very hard, and you have to find out from Farouk what he did. Farouk and Muzaffar worked hard on this. And they produced these designs that I had developed for them. The design, of course, this is upside down. You can't turn it around. It's shown upside down. The design that is on top, you see Ali, Ya Ali Madad, and
Okay, yes, Ali Madad.
You see Ya Ali Madad, this is again upside down. It has to turn around. Up. The bottom should be up, but doesn't matter. So I have that, and then I have I was at you see, for the Ismailis, the Conference of the Birds of Attar, Mantiqo Teira Attar, is very important, and they teach it in their schools. So I decided to develop an image which relates to the image of the Seymour, of that mythical bird in the Conference of Birds of Attar. And the one you see up, which says Muhammad on top, with the Allah shows like flames of fire, was my inspiration from the image of Seymour from the Mantiqo Teira of Attar. If you know that, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
And the Muhammad is to the Muhammadan truth, which is identical to the Seymour in Mantiqo Teira of Attar. And in Mantiqo Teira of Attar, there's a lot of talk about the fire of love and so on. And that's why Allah looks like flames of fire. Anyway, the one in the bottom right-hand side is another interpretation of different things in the literary tradition of our culture, which we share. And this is the design in floriated Kufi design, which we use to put around the entrance portals of the university. And I sent somebody from Boston to sandblast this around the entrance portal. A design that Tom also liked very much, and he took a sample of this and put it upside down under his shower in his bathroom, which was a blast to me, because it says La ilaha illallah all the time. Okay. But this also became the main calligraphy for the gates. Do you have a sample of the gate I sent you?
Yes, there is one sample of the gate as well.
I have to tell you a little story about this. When I came back to Boston in 1980, I went to the site and I met the Aga Khan. He came to visit the site at that time with President Zia.
Yeah.
And the School of Nursing was being constructed.
Okay.
Because he had said that he does not want to do anything about the School of Medicine until nurses are prepared. What is the use of having hospital without nurses? Yeah. So that achieved prominence. So that was under construction.
Okay.
The Aga Khan came to me and he said, Muzhan, the gate for the School of Nursing is terrible. It looks like a prison gate. And I really know who had done that, because when I came back and I saw the designs, they were all terrible. I said, I will change that. And he asked me to promise to change that gate. When I changed that, I used a version of this calligraphy you see on the nurses' gates.
Yes, we have got that photograph, but
it's not the complete. It's not the complete design of the gate, because the complete design was developed later, and I couldn't use that complete design. But it's good enough that the Aga Khan was happy with it. This whole gate is designed in a floriated Kufic design, and the person who did that was Isam al-Ani. And I thought that with this stark background of marble, a very ornate gate would be appropriate there. And I remember that Shams Qasim Laha asked me to make these gates in aluminum. I said, fine, but my recommendation is that these gates should be in bronze.
Okay.
And Shams Qasim Laha, who wanted to save money, he had me go back and forth to Pakistan 5-6 times, convince me that I should say it should be made in aluminum. I said, but don't ask me to say it should be in bronze. I won't say it. It has to be and don't say me, don't ask me to be in aluminum. I'll never say that. It has to be in bronze. But if you want it in aluminum, we'll do it in aluminum. Once I was under major
No compromise
operation
you
in
made.
Mass General Hospital, and he sent his construction manager. His name was Brian Carlisle. He came to my hospital to visit me. I said, Brian, you didn't come to my deathbed to wish me well. You came, it's a letter from me that it should be in bronze. He said, yes. I said, I'll never give that letter to you. He said, I said, let me ask you a question. Are you a patriotic Englishman or not? He said, yes. I said, remember, these gates will wind up in British Museum someday. Do you want them in bronze or in aluminum? And then so finally, I said, ask the Aga Khan. They asked the Aga Khan.
Okay.
You know what the Aga Khan said?
Yeah.
He said, Mozhan is right. But since 35 in bronze is very expensive, tell him to choose 5 important ones and make it in bronze. And we did 5 gates in bronze.
Well,
and do you know why I insisted on the gate being in bronze? Everything on this gate is based on La ilaha illallah. The reason is that we could not do different kinds of verses because it would cost a lot more money. We did one and we replicated it.
Okay.
But in the middle band, down on the door, I chose a special verse from the Quran, which says, "Adkhuluha bisalamin aminin," which means enter therein with and peace be, enter therein in peace and peace be upon you. That's the sentence I used there. And of course, you know, when I did that, very few people except Farouk knew, and except Essam knew what I was choosing. The lines in the middle of calligraphy is based on an abstracted construction on which Kufic calligraphy is made. So it's really a simplified lines which relates to Kufic calligraphy. This design is also what I also used in the gates for the AKUH University, not the calligraphy, but the simple design, because at AKUH, calligraphy, Islamic calligraphy was prevalent in Turkey until Ataturk took over. So now the reason I insisted it being in bronze is because the Aga Khan is the role of the Aga Khan is the continuation of the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt.
Yeah.
And 1,000 years before this Aga Khan, the Al-Azhar University was built by a Fatimid Caliph.
Okay.
Al-Azhar University being the most prominent university in the Islamic world right now. Yeah. Although they Shias now, it's a Sunni institution. So I felt that after 1,000 years, he is building a university. Of course, it was after this university has built other ones too, but this was the one that he started, I believe, with. So I thought, okay, what should be the gate of this university be? Probably gold, as far as their culture is concerned. So I said it should be bronze. Anyway, that was the reason. The reason I wanted to see this is because there's also a picture showing all of the tile designs are made in the waiting room. And when I presented that, I presented it this way. I said, these tile designs are very important because they are reference to certain literary ideas and concepts in our literature. And this is how surfaces communicate with people. And the surfaces show the spirit of people and they make them feel at home. If somebody is erudite, he can read these tiles. And if he is not erudite, he's familiar and he becomes comforted by it. And if person who is erudite will go from one poet to another philosopher, and while they are waiting, they discover all of these things, and then when they discover these things, they become cured, and they don't need to see the doctor. They go home, and everybody laughed.
Wonderful.
Okay.
It is happening actually.
That's the
People are familiar.
importance of surfaces.
Yeah.
Because that's how a building communicates with people. You can have a dialogue with a building.
Yeah.
When you go to your great historic monuments in Pakistan, a person who is erudite or even illiterate can communicate with those surfaces. Just imagine if they were all devoid of all of these images. Every interior space that I had detailed perspectives drawn. Do you see the jolly work, transparent stuff that in front of the windows? When I took over to control the whole project, all of those, instead of that fine woodwork, they were blades of concrete, and I had to take it out. When the project got into trouble and the Aga Khan wanted it redesigned. This is the outpatient waiting area, and I developed that particular design of the tile, which is based on a traditional design on a very stark white surface, and I think it looks good. I don't know how it looks now. I am happy with the result of the Aga Khan project, but I am not 100% satisfied. The reason is that although I was from 1979 onward in complete control of everything, still, I inherited certain things that were messed up when I was in Iran, before I came to Pakistan to take over completely. And I had to fix them, and I fixed them to make sure it's consistent with the design philosophy. But also, Tom Payette, great friend as he was, and helped me a lot, especially because I would not compromise on anything. Sometimes Tom would compromise because otherwise I would have had a fight. You know what I mean? Not with Tom, but with agents of the client, not the client itself, the construction managers and so on. And he would just make sure that things would smooth until I could accomplish what I wanted to do. But Tom himself did not have really any interest in history or in literature or in stuff like that. He would listen, but he wasn't the kind of guy to go home and try to understand this. I think until he died, he really didn't know what, for example, Islamic culture of Pakistan was all about, or did not understand what Ismaili movement was all about and what was its history. And I think for somebody not to know all of that is more likely to compromise. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes. Okay.
So, but other than that, I got a lot of support from Tom, because Tom would not do anything that I don't want to do. But after I left that office, he published everything under his name, wouldn't even give me credit. That wasn't very good. But I forgive him because he didn't interfere me when I was working. This is the library. Yeah. And I put calligraphy in there. All the carpets were designed by me in the library. Yeah. Calligraphy that is on top of the classrooms, they are all different. Some of them are my design, and some of them are the designs that I did with design for the walls of the facility, which is inspired by the gypsum work of the Palace of Alhambra. The reason Tom Payette was very reluctant to include my name in the architecture review, but I showed him the contract and he had to put it.